Jimmy Johnstone lost at sea. In May 1974, just weeks before the World Cup in West Germany, Scotland's training camp in Largs produced one of the strangest off-field stories in football history, when Celtic legend Jimmy Johnstone, aka Jinky, had to be rescued from the sea. After a 2-0 win over Wales at Hampden, manager Willie Ormond gave his players permission to enjoy a night out, but he said, "Don't go mental." Now, at around 5 AM on their way back to the team hotel, Johnstone and a few teammates, including Rangers' Sandy Jordan, Hibs' Eric Shadler and Chelsea's Davy Hay, spotted a rowing boat on the shore. Jinky, always the joker, climbed in, but what started as a laugh quickly turned into chaos when Sandy Jordan jokingly pushed the boat out further, only for the tide to catch it. Suddenly, Scotland's star winger was being swept out to sea, and the boat didn't even have oars. Panic set in as the players realised they couldn't bring him back, and the Coast Guard had to be called. Eventually, Johnstone was rescued and brought safely to dry land, but the headlines the next morning were not very forgiving. Scotland's World Cup prep was being overshadowed by their best player almost drifting off to Ireland before a ball had even been kicked. But fans quickly forgave Jinky, especially just a few days later when he starred in Scotland's 2-0 win over England at Hampden. What could have been a disaster for Scotland is now remembered as one of football's funniest moments. The night Jimmy Johnstone, one of the greatest wingers the game has ever seen, was nearly lost at sea. Ali McCoist, number 5. When you think of Ali McCoist, you think goals, you think Rangers, you think classic number 9. But at Euro 92, McCoist somehow ended up wearing the number 5 shirt for Scotland. Yep, a centre forward, one of the most natural strikers in the country's history, running around Sweden dressed like a centre back. So how on earth did this happen? Well, it all comes down to a bizarre numbering system dreamed up by Andy Roxburgh and his staff. See, most tournaments back then stuck pretty closely to the old 1 to 11 format. Keepers in number 1, strikers in 9, playmakers 10. But Scotland ripped up the tradition completely. They decided squad numbers would be handed out based on caps won, the only exception being the goalkeeper and the captain. Andy Gorham took number 1, Richard Gough wore 2, and then from there it was straight down the cap list. That's why Paul McStay with 50 caps somehow ended up in the number 3 shirt, Maurice Malpass with 50 took number 4, and next in line with 38 was Ali McCoist, which is how one of Europe's deadliest strikers wound up having to wear the number 5 shirt. It got even weirder. Brian McClair, another forward, was number 6, Dave McPherson, a centre-back, wore 8, and Aberdeen's right-back Stuart McKimmie was given the honour of wearing number 9. Sadly, the quirky numbering didn't bring Scotland much luck. They lost to the Netherlands and Germany, meaning they were already out before beating the Commonwealth of Independent States 3-0 in their final game. And while McStay, McClair and Gally McAllister got on the scoresheet, McCoist and his unlucky number 5 shirt went home goalless. To this day, no other national team has tried that system again. Probably because it's ridiculous. Diego Maradona Jr, the son of football's greatest, nearly played in Scotland. No, he wasn't world class like his dad, but this one's too wild not to include. It's July 2004, Dunfermline just finished 4th in the SPL and reached the Scottish Cup final. Manager David Hay is looking for that spark. His Italian agent mate says, "How about Diego Maradona's son?" The football world flings its arms in disbelief. Maradona Jr arrives at Edinburgh Airport with an entourage, agents, family, the whole circus. He trains with Dunfermline for 2 days at East End Park, with public sessions to build even more media hype. But then his demands arrived. He wanted a flat, first-class flights for his family, and a much higher wage than Dunfermline were expecting. Jim Leishman said he was decent, but not good enough for what he wanted. And that was proven correct, as he only ever made it as high as Serie C and beach football and didn't earn a contract with Dunfermline. But the name, the moment, and the media circus, it was pure Scottish football theatre. Duncan Ferguson. There are tough footballers, and then there's Duncan Ferguson, one of the scariest players a football pitch has ever seen. He started at Dundee United in 1990 before Rangers made him Britain's most expensive player in 1993, £4 million. But a year later, he'd make history for all the wrong reasons. In a game against Raith Rovers, Ferguson headbutted defender John McStay, right there on the pitch. The ref missed it, but the police didn't. And as he had previous, he was actually jailed for assault, 3 months behind bars, the first British player ever locked up for something that happened during a match. After that, he became an Everton legend, where fans adored him, but everyone else feared him. He picked up 8 red cards in the Premier League, a joint record, and that was all down to his aggressive playstyle. And off the pitch, things were just as wild. He had 4 assault convictions, fights in pubs, taxi ranks, even a fisherman, and then some idiots decided to try and rob him. In 2001, 2 burglars broke into his house. Ferguson fought them off, one ended up in hospital, then 2 years later, someone tried it again, with the same result, being hospitalised. When you've got burglars limping away and Premier League defenders terrified, you've earned your nickname. Big Dunk, Duncan Disorderly, one of the scariest men to ever lace up a pair of football boots. 2010. After another 3rd place in 2006, Scotland were desperate to turn the corner. Alex McCoist had come close to taking them to Euro 2008, so close, but then he left for Birmingham, and in came George Burley from Southampton, the man who'd been tasked with finally ending the exile and taking Scotland to South Africa. On paper, the draw didn't look impossible. A smaller 5-team group with the Netherlands, Norway, Iceland and Macedonia, but fewer teams meant fewer games, fewer points up for grabs, and basically no room for error. And it didn't take long for things to go wrong. On the 6th of September 2008, Scotland opened the campaign away to Macedonia, and within 5 minutes, they were 1 down. Macedonia scored early, and that was that. A nightmare start for Burley. They bounced back with a scrappy 2-1 win over Iceland, but any early optimism evaporated as the campaign went on, especially after Chris Iwelumo managed to miss an open goal from 3 yards out in a 0-0 draw with Norway. Next, a 3-0 defeat to the Netherlands showed just how far behind the top nation Scotland were. Then off the pitch, it all got a bit messy. Captain Barry Ferguson and goalkeeper Alan McGregor were dropped after going out for a few too many drinks following the match, a scandal that became tabloid gold and saw them suspended from the next game. And when the results mattered most, they just weren't there. Scotland were absolutely thumped 4-0 by Norway, a result that basically ended any realistic hope of qualifying. From there, it was all about pride. A 2-0 win over Macedonia gave a flicker of hope, but a 1-0 loss to the Netherlands at Hampden sealed it. In the end, Scotland finished 3rd again, level on points with Norway, but behind on goal difference, and a massive 10 points off the Dutch, who won all 8 games. Even if they had sneaked into 2nd, they were one of the weakest runners-up, so the playoffs wouldn't have saved them anyway. Burley somehow survived the post-qualifying review, but a 3-0 friendly defeat to Wales was the final straw. The SFA sacked him, and with that ended another campaign full of familiar frustration. By 2010, Scotland fans had become accustomed to missing out on the big tournaments, so really, it was nothing new. Victor Wanyama, number 67. When Victor Wanyama arrived at Celtic from Belgium side Beerschot in 2011, he had a bold idea. Instead of picking a classic midfielder's number, he chose 67 to honour the Lisbon Lions, the legendary Celtic side that lifted the European Cup in 1967. It was a gamble. If he flopped, the headlines would have written themselves, a player letting the shirt down. But instead, Victor Wanyama made that number his own. Signed for just 900,000, the Kenyan midfielder quickly became a powerhouse in Neil Lennon's side. He made his league debut in August 2011, which was a 1-0 loss to St Johnstone, but within a year he was dominating games in Scotland and attracting huge interest from down south. QPR even launched an £8.5 million bid after his first season, nearly 10 times what Celtic had paid. But his real place in history came on a night in November 2012. Celtic Park, the Champions League, and Barcelona in town. Wanyama rose highest from a corner and powered a header past Victor Valdez, becoming the first Kenyan to ever score in the competition and sending Celtic fans into dreamland as they pulled off a famous 2-1 victory. By 2013, his performances had earned him a record-breaking £12.5 million move to Southampton, at the time the most expensive sale in Scottish football history. But at Celtic, he'll always be remembered as the man who wore 67 with pride, channeling the spirit of the Lisbon Lions and backing it up with performances that made him a hero in his own right. Lionel Messi. In the early 2000s, Messi was just a tiny teenager lighting it up in Barcelona's youth ranks. Rangers were going through a bit of a rebuild under Alex McCoist, Barry Ferguson had left for Blackburn, and they were sniffing around for creative midfielders. A few years earlier, while the manager of Hibs, Alex McLeish's son, John, spotted a young Lionel Messi in Football Manager and told his dad he's going to be the best player in the world. Years later, now managing Rangers, McLeish remembered the name and asked about Messi through assistant Jan Wouters, who was pals with Barcelona's Henk ten Cate. The answer, a polite but definite no chance. Messi was already on the fringes of the Barca team and they thought Scottish football might be a bit too physical for him anyway. At the same time, they also inquired about another youngster, Andreas Iniesta. Tenkati told Wouters he'd get back to him, but Iniesta made the team that weekend and never looked back. So no, Messi didn't nearly play at Ibrox, but Rangers genuinely asked, and imagine if the answer had been yes. Hamilton Academical £1 million scam. Back in 2017, Hamilton Academical were left red-faced after falling victim to what has to be one of the most embarrassing frauds in Scottish football history. Almost £1 million, basically all the money the club had, vanished in just 2 days after staff were tricked by scammers posing to be Royal Bank of Scotland's fraud team. It's what's called a vishing scam. The fraudsters phoned up, convinced the Accies employee that the club's funds were under threat, and persuaded them to move the cash into so-called safe accounts. In reality, those accounts belonged to criminals. Over 20 separate transactions went out, with sums like 655,000 leaving in 1 day. RBS's system even flagged suspicious payments, but the Accies employee was persuaded to override the warnings. Chief Executive Colin McGowan later admitted, "You wouldn't need to be Sherlock Holmes to see something was wrong here." The fallout was brutal. Over £800,000 never came back. Players had to be sold on the cheap, and money was taken from the club's youth academy just to keep the lights on. The Accies even tried to sue Royal Bank of Scotland, claiming the bank should share half the blame. But the truth is, the scam only worked because their internal checks were so weak. For a club with crowds of around 2,500, it was nearly fatal. The £1 million scam left Accies as the punchline to one of Scottish football's most costly blunders. Let's just hope they don't run into a Nigerian prince anytime soon. If you're enjoying this video, please consider subscribing, it massively helps out, and if you're feeling extra generous, why not hit like on the video as well. Back to it. Jack Aitchison. Jack Aitchison's debut for Celtic is the kind every young player dreams of. On the 15th of May 2016, at just 16 years and 71 days old, he came off the bench against Motherwell, and with his first touch of the ball, he scored. That made him not only Celtic's youngest ever player and goal scorer, but also the youngest scorer in Scottish Premiership history. But despite that fairy tale debut, Aitchison never really managed to properly break into the Celtic side. He went on a string of loans, had a brief spell down south with Barnsley, and even a brief return to Scotland with Motherwell, before finally settling at Exeter City, where he spent the last couple of seasons. Now 25, Aitchison might not have become a Celtic regular, but he holds a record that's gonna be quite difficult to beat. The youngest ever scorer in the Scottish Premiership. Ronaldo, not Cristiano, the original R9. One of the most electrifying strikers to ever kick a football. A World Cup winner by 17, a Ballon d'Or winner by 21, and in 1997, he nearly signed for Rangers. Ronaldo was tearing up La Liga with Barcelona. 47 goals in 49 games. Ballon d'Or winner, European Cup winner, but contract negotiations were stuck. That's when Giovanni Brancini, his agent, got some serious offers, and one came from Glasgow. Brancini revealed Rangers pitched it big. He didn't have to play in the Scottish League on Saturdays, he'd only feature in Champions League fixtures, he'd be the highest paid player in history, over even what he earned at Barcelona. Brancini described it as incredible. Ronaldo later confirmed it. He said, "Yes, it's true. I received an offer from Glasgow Rangers. We looked at it and decided the best offer at the time was from Inter Milan, so I gave my apologies." It was real, it was bold, but when Inter Milan triggered his release clause with a then world record bid of around 20 million, it was clear there was only one place he was going. Ronaldo went to Inter, dominated Serie A, scored 59 goals in 99 games, and became a legend across Milan, Madrid, and Brazil. So yeah, Rangers almost signed Ronaldo, El Phenomenon himself. It never happened, but in the summer of 1997, Scotland stared down the barrel of football history's most insane what if. Hicham Zerouali, number 0. In football, there's been some wild shirt numbers over the years, but none quite like Hicham Zerouali's. When the Moroccan forward joined Aberdeen in 1999 for 450,000 from Fuz de Rabat, he initially wore number 47. But after Aberdeen fans nicknamed him Zero, he did something that no player in the UK had done before. He wore the number 0. Instantly becoming a cult hero at Pittodrie, he lit up the pitch with flair, tricks and long-range goals, quickly proving he deserved the title of fan favourite. Teammates were equally impressed. David Priest recalled watching him at training, taking the ball to the byline and bending a shot past Jim Leighton with the outside of his boot. Darren Young described him as a lovely guy, the sort it's impossible to dislike, and fans would always remember his unique style. Sadly though, the number 0 was banned in British football the following season, forcing Zerouali to switch to number 11 for the following season. Despite only 48 games for Aberdeen, he scored 13 goals, helped the club reach 2 cup finals, and became a symbol of creativity in Scottish football. After leaving Scotland, he played for Al Nassr in the UAE, then back home to Morocco to play for FAR Rabat. Tragically, in 2004, just a day after scoring twice for FAR Rabat, Zerouali lost his life in a car crash, aged just 27. Fans gathered at Pittodrie to pay tribute, and his legacy lives on as Britain's first and only footballer to wear the number 0. Rest in peace, Hicham Zerouali.